Hello, welcome back. Thought I'd try something different. I wanted to talk about driving because that's what turned me into a car enthusiast. Driving as a when I quickly talked about this a while ago in a video. What kind of car enthusiast? What kind of enthusiast are you? Are you driving enthusiast? Are you car enthusiast? Sort of thing. And I talked about how as a little kid I used to play with Hot Wheels toys, and I liked the Hot Wheels toys because they looked cool. And I played with them because, well, it was strange. Like I played with them like they had no drivers in them. Kind of like in the movie Cars, where the car was the personality. The car had its own, you know, quirks, characteristics, its strengths and its flaws. And I guess in that way, cars are like people, and that's perhaps why we get attached to them or we like them so much. A truck will do certain things that a regular car can't do, and a car can do things that a truck can't do. And it all comes down to how it makes us feel. Now, as a kid, not knowing anything about driving, never driven before, 6 years old, laying on the carpet in the living room, playing with a Hot Wheels toy, the car was its own entity. And I'd play with that car with the other cars like people would interact. The cars would talk, cars would say things. I don't necessarily think there would be, I never thought in my head, there's a driver in here, and the driver is saying these things and doing these things. That wasn't the truth. The truth was, it was like the Cars cartoon movie. The cars had their personalities, they drove around, they did things. One car was the cool car, one car was or the two rival cool cars. I don't think I ever had an accountant car or a bookkeeper car. And I used to watch television, and on television in the 80s, the big thing was, car chases, police cars, chasing the bad guys in the or the or the police being the bad guys chasing the good guys in the cars, right? Kind of like Dukes of Hazzard. So pick a movie. Growing up watching Dukes of Hazzards, I didn't really know that what they were doing was, illegal, prohibition stuff, running moonshine. I really didn't know. Really didn't understand any of that. I just thought, hey, it was cool. The car did jumps. The car had its own personality. It kind of didn't in the show. I mean, but as the Dinky toy, as the little die-cast Hot Wheels car, it had its personality, and it took on the personality, that the actors had, and that there was a position it played in the television show. This rogue hero. trying to do the greater good. And I didn't know the greater good was delivering booze. But that's what the Duke boys were all about, right? The greater good. And I guess so was Roscoe Pico trying to be the police officer. But he was working for the boss hog. You know? Always, always the flying monkey, doing the bidding of the Wicked Witch, Boss Hog. I actually had the Boss Hog. I had the whole set there. I had the whole set. I had the Dukes of Hazards. Generally, I had the Dukes of Hazards, police car, Roscoe. I actually think it had Roscoe on the bottom. And then I had the Boss Hog convertible Cadillac with the steer horns on the front. I didn't play with that one much. But it was, Fat Cat Evil Car. But I'd mix those, I'd mix that up with the other Hot Wheels and stuff that I had, the weird cars, and I'd turn it into some sort of weird Mad Max story, Road Warrior kind of thing, because the cars took on the personalities of the people that were, driving them in the movies, sort of thing. Without the people running around, it would just be the cars. And I guess you could say driving from a third person perspective, I'd be driving these cars around. I'm the omnipotent, godlike figure moving these cars around, making turns, making the tire screeches with my noise, with my mouth, the engine noises with my mouth, the rumbling of the V8s. And it wasn't until I started stealing my mom's car. I was about 13 years old. She bought a little Datsun. She bought a little Datsun car, and it was a standard, and she was excited to get it. And she took us kids for rides in it, and she showed us, how the manual thing. It was a manual, so she got it to learn manual, and while she was learning manual on it, she was basically teaching us, not instructing us on how to use it, but she, through her learning and us watching, well, me watching anyway, you know, I learned to watch how to drive that car. And then one day, well, what it was, this is how I got the inspiration for this. I had a friend, and he had three older brothers. He was the youngest of these four brothers, and their family owned a business, and we would go deliver rice. Now, the driver's license thing wasn't that important to them because they looked Asian, everybody else was white, so they all looked the same. And they used that to their advantage. So when me and my buddy would go deliver rice, and the other brothers weren't around, and he had to go deliver rice, he would just say, "Dude, let's go deliver." He's like, "I don't." He would go see an older brother and say, "Hey, give me your driver's license. I'm gonna go deliver rice." And his older brother would say, "Yeah, sure, here you go." And then he told me, "Yeah, I use this. I use his driver's license because we kind of look the same." And that's what we did. And we would drive around all over the city. We would load up the van, their family van, or the cargo van, or whatever it was, full of rice, and then we would just bomb around town, driving around. This was in junior high. This is in grade 8, grade 9, something like that. 13, 14, somewhere in there. Anyway, so he, by doing that with him and figuring out, hey, we can just drive around as long as you don't get caught, right? So I started to do that. I started to, when my mom and dad were away at work, we were home after school or on the weekend or whatever it was. I would take the keys to that Datsun. I would go figure out how to try to start it. I would go figure out how to try to back it out where it was. I'd learn to try to shift gears, use the clutch, drive around our neighborhood, like literally around the block, down the alleyways. And it wasn't until it got snowy and slippery that I found out how much fun cars could be. Because that little Datsun didn't have a whole lot of power, of course. It was a little four cylinder. It was they're collectibles now because they were so reliable and so simple. But it was also rear wheel drive. So I made the mistake one day of going around a corner and giving it too much gas because I was overconfident driving around the block, and I got it to spin, and that was exciting. That was so exciting. It was like stuff that happened in the movies, but it happened to me. You know, like I think if I had that Datsun as a Hot Wheels car, I wouldn't have paid it much attention. It wasn't all flashy. It wasn't anything. It didn't look like it had a big motor. It didn't anything like that. But that's when I learned how much fun driving could be. Well, how much fun driving is, but how much fun cars could be. And that started my, I guess, well, my thrill for driving, first of all. I'm actually going to turn around here and go back. My thrill for driving, of course. But then it also told me, because when I started learning about cars after that, because you learn what cars can do. Like that little car did that little bit for me, going around the block and then, spinning it out around a corner. The thrill of, speeding up, of braking. You're always kind of on this edge of losing control. I mean, a new driver, it's all new, right? That thrill of instant death, always being there, awaiting around every corner. Are you going to make it, or are you going to spin out, hit the curb, hit another car, crash your car, that kind of thing? That little bit of a thrill that happens when that happens. Yeah, and as I got older, and I started to realize cars are made differently and they all do different things. They all feel different when you turn the steering wheel, when you step on the brake, when you step on the gas, when you turn a corner. I was never one for floaty, mushy cars. My parents would talk about, Cadillacs or Lincolns, and big boats that floated along the highway like you're on a cloud and sitting in a sofa, plushy sofa. And I've had those cars, and I've driven kind of cars like that, and they've never really done it for me. I have always preferred responsive cars. Maybe say something in the comments if you're listening, because I do know people that just like their luxury cars. You know. And I'm not talking fake luxury. I'm talking about real luxury where you are floating around, you are sitting in a big fluffy sofa. Everything's like easy going, man. And I always thought, yeah, I'd enjoy that. I got it out of my system. I mean, we had a 1970 Ford LTD custom convertible, power everything, massive V8 in it, 4 barrel carburetor, 429 or something like that. It was, and driving that on, and we only drove it on the highway. We were driving it out to my parents' house from the city all the time, and it was a gas. I was a teenager at the time. Pile all my friends in that thing because it was all bench seats, so it didn't really matter how many people you put in it. We go out, go to restaurants, go hang out somewhere, someone's house. It was fabulous little car, little fabulous massive boat. That was really, really, really cool. And I've never had the inkling to go back and find another one, other than for the fact that, you know, to have one, maybe enjoy it once in a while. But I learned to drive like a nutcase. I really did. I really enjoyed the speed. I really enjoyed the terror of driving like a lunatic, driving fast. As a young guy, maybe it was the adrenaline, maybe it was the testosterone. I don't know. Back in the day, we still had testosterone as teenagers. I don't know about nowadays. And the funnest things that we would do was race our cars around the city. Getting together, a group of friends, and just go racing. Because there were no tracks. There were no tracks for us to do it. And even if there were tracks, it was too expensive for us to actually do it. Nobody we could barely keep our cars on the road, let alone have a sidecar to race with on weekends formally on a track if there was one. But what was readily available for us were small four-cylinder cars that were cheap. The price, the depreciation had bottom out on all of these cars that we would buy, and so if you lost a car, another 2,000, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 would get you a really nice car for that price, right? And it wasn't too hard to make up that kind of money. A few months at a job, you could go out and buy a car and insure it. Insurance, get the lowest amount of insurance. It was cheap. And buying and selling those cars and driving them around, I really learned what I liked in cars. I liked handling more so than power. Power was fine, but I drove cars with lots of power and no handling, and they're dangerous. That's why I stayed away from American cars because that was the deal with American cars. They usually had a lot of power, and the handling was never really that good. Not nowhere near as good as you could buy in a Japanese car or a European car, which just came standard with excellent handling. especially European cars back in the day. Especially the German cars, because they were all built so that they could do the autobahn, like do some serious driving at 200 kilometers an hour. Even the little four cylinders, right? They had to keep up on those little roads, on those highways and those high speeds. And just bombing around town at 60 and 80 kilometers an hour. The cars were built for that. Whereas American cars weren't. American cars are built to drive in a straight line for forever on a highway. God forbid you throw a turn in. And Japanese cars were a very close second, especially if you got the. Back in the day, they used to have the sporty models of the Econo boxes. Those were gems. If you've watched Initial D, the Corolla GTS, AE86, whatever they want to designate it now, I just knew them. You got the Supra, there was a GT, but then there was a GTS, Celica GTS, 240 SX, Nissan, MR2s, Civic SIs. The SIs always had upgraded handling, tires, reinforced, whatever you call them, sway bars, front and rear, struts. Yeah, and you could drive around the city and take a corner at 60 kilometers an hour, 50 kilometers an hour. And people in other cars and Ford Tauruses and things would look at you like you're retarded. But you could do it in those little cars. They were light, there was nothing to them, and they were just fun. And you would never get in anywhere near top speeds. That was the other thing. Like, the speed was from one corner to the next corner. That was your top speed. And the thing is that you usually won these races or these things in the corners, under braking, in the grip around the turn. More so than you did off of any launch of big power at the end of a corner or on a straightaway. Because you get that big power, you're just a heat bag for cops. But the little power, cops didn't pay us very much attention. That's when I learned, that's when I became a car enthusiast. Really, really fully was going through cars, seeing which ones drove, and then listening to the numbers. Top speed, 0 to 60s, what it had for suspension. Would give you an indication of how fun this car could be. And then we would go test drive them. We would go test drive cars. We'd go to dealerships, we'd phone people up, and we would just basically test drive the cars just to see what that car does. Do we like it? How does it feel? Does it suit my driving style? How are the throws in the gearboxes? How does the pedal respond? How does the brake? How does the gas pedal, the throttle respond? How does the brake pedal respond? How well does it take a corner? And then we'd figure out, oh, this car's for me, kind of thing. And then just from that, you start to look at cars and you're like, hey, I like this because it's got that, it's got this, it's got that. I've never driven it, but ooh, there's so much potential behind for fun behind that car, behind the wheel of that car. That's what that really meant. That's that's what it really means. Like, for me as a car enthusiast, because I'm not enthusiastic about cars, other than the fact, the potential fun that it is, right? But first and foremost, I'm a driving enthusiast. I'm nerdy enough to watch videos on how to take corners. I remember learning that in magazines and looking for race car drivers to talk about how they won these races under braking and things like that. That was always, you know, I couldn't get enough of that stuff. I could not get enough of that stuff. I probably should have went to racing school, but I really wasn't in a place to do that. I remember one time, me and my friends, we were sitting around, and I had a friend there. He's from Hong Kong, and he really wanted to do racing. And he came to us one day and said, "Hey, there's this international driving school. It costs $2,500. No, it was more than that. $7,000. It was like going to university. That's right. $7,000. We all get our racing licenses, and then we can all go racing. It was somewhere in Ontario. The whole thing seemed. It was a week long or 2 weeks long. It was long. It was long enough for us to go. This is a big investment because we got to get flights out, or we could drive down. But then we have to find a place to stay, and we have to live while going to the racing school. Pay for food and shelter and that kind of thing. So, I mean, we were all 16, 17. I don't think we weren't even old enough to drink yet. And I think we all just said, no, this is too far fetched right now at this point. I like that little Fiat, man. I'm going to go have a look at it. The Fiat Spider. I had a massive car accident in the 90s. It was a head on thing. Completely squished and turned my Volkswagen Scirocco into this unrecognizable tin can. And then afterwards, I was trying to find insurance for a car, and it was too expensive. I was paying $4,500 a year for insurance on a $2,000 car. So $4,500, yeah. So I gave up on that, and that's when I got my motorcycle. So I could buy a motorcycle for the same price as a car, and then insurance would only be $300 a year. But in that time, like I was looking for fun cars, and I actually looked at a bunch of MGs, and one was similar looking to it. There was an ad in the Bargain Finder, and Buddy had it, and it was a Fiat Spider, just like this one that I'm going to go look at. Except it was green. He had painted it that British racing green, everybody called it, but it was just a dark forest green, right, with a metallic kind of glint in it. The interior was black vinyl, and this one is tan. I think it looks like, yeah. Let's go have a look at this because I thought it was a really pretty car. And it was when I was looking for those cars, everybody was saying, "Well, you have to be a mechanic because things come loose. Things always go wrong on them." And I wasn't a mechanic. I was not a mechanic by anybody's stretch of the imagination. Yeah, there we go. That's a pretty little car. Young and Andy. Well, let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at it. It's a cool little car. I did drive it around. Took it for a test drive. They're fun. It's all original. I know they have this battery thing under, or the electrical thing that's under the passenger seat that goes wrong.